I never meant for her to find it. The scrapbook wasn't meant to be read, not by her, not by anyone. It started as a way for me to cope, a quiet ritual after long days, a small private way of saying, I see you, even when my daughter couldn't see herself. Every parent keeps something, report cards, crayon drawings, baby shoes. I kept moments, not the pretty ones, the ones I was afraid to forget. It began when Lily was 6. She'd come home from first grade crying because a boy had called her fat in the cafeteria. I remember kneeling in front of her, brushing her hair back and saying, he's wrong. She sniffled and nodded, but I saw the seed plant itself in her eyes. That night, after she fell asleep, I found a blank journal in the kitchen drawer and wrote, Today, Lily learned cruelty exists. I wish I could unteach it. I glued a photo of her from that morning beside the entry, smiling, gap-toothed, untouched by that moment. That was the first page. It became a habit, almost a compulsion. Whenever something hurt her, the day she broke her arm at camp, the first time a teacher embarrassed her, the time she came home after being left out of a sleepover, I'd write it down. I'd add pictures, ticket stubs, small relics of those days. I told myself I was preserving her strength, that one day, when she was grown and healed, I'd show her how much she'd survived. But somewhere along the line, it stopped being about her healing and became about my fear. She grew up fast, faster than I expected. By 15, she was independent, sharp-tongued, a little distant. Teenagers are supposed to pull away, but every inch she gained felt like a mile I was losing. I started writing more, not just her pain, but my own. She doesn't tell me things anymore. I don't know who she's becoming. I filled pages I told myself were love letters, but really they were confessions. By the time she turned 17, the scrapbook had become a record of both of us, her growing up, me falling apart. My marriage had collapsed quietly 2 years earlier, and while she barely spoke of it, I could see the tension in her posture, the new silence in her laughter. I added that too. Lily smiles less now. I wish she didn't feel responsible for my sadness. I hid the scrapbook in a box under my bed beneath stacks of old linens. Every time I added a new entry, I told myself it was harmless, that documenting her darkness was a way of honoring it, of keeping it from consuming her. But what I didn't realize was that it had started consuming me instead. The day she found it, the air outside was warm, one of those first spring days that smell like promise. I was in the kitchen, making dinner, when I heard her voice, sharp, breaking. Mum? I turned, knife still in hand, and saw her standing in the doorway holding the book. She looked small and furious all at once. What is this? She asked. My breath caught. Where did you— It was under your bed. I was looking for the old photo albums, and I found this. She opened it, pages flipping under her trembling hands. Did you write all this about me? My mouth went dry. Lily, listen. You wrote about when I cut my arm in middle school, about when I failed my driving test. Even when I said I hated Dad, you wrote everything. I took a step closer. I was just trying to remember, to hold on to things. Hold on to what? Her voice cracked. To my worst moments. The room spun with the weight of what she was saying. It wasn't like that. I wrote those things because I love you. She slammed the book shut. That's not love, Mom. That's control. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, but part of me knew she wasn't. She stormed out, the door shaking behind her. I stood in the kitchen, knife in one hand, empty space in the other. That night, I sat on the couch staring at the door, waiting for her to come home. Every sound from the street made me flinch. When she finally returned near midnight, her eyes were red, her hair messy, her voice quiet but firm. I can't believe you kept all that, she said, like you were collecting evidence of every time I failed. It wasn't evidence, I whispered. It was love. She shook her head. It feels like you never let me be happy without reminding me of when I wasn't. She went to her room, and I didn't follow. For the first time, I realized I didn't know how to fix it. Over the next few days, we lived like strangers. She avoided me. I avoided mirrors. The scrapbook sat on the kitchen counter, untouched, like a silent accusation. I thought about throwing it away, but I couldn't. Every page felt like a piece of her, of me. Then, one night, I woke up to the sound of paper tearing. I walked into the kitchen to find her sitting on the floor surrounded by scraps. She was ripping the pages one by one. Lily, stop, I said. She looked up at me with wet eyes. I'm deleting the worst parts of me, Mum. You should have done that instead of keeping them. I knelt beside her, reaching for her hand. She pulled away. Do you have any idea what it feels like to know that the person who's supposed to protect you was busy documenting your pain? Her voice was raw. You kept a museum of my sadness. I couldn't breathe. I just wanted to remember who we were, she whispered. You remember wrong. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the trash can where the shreds of our history lay, wondering if love sometimes turns into surveillance without us noticing. For days, the house felt hollow. She stayed in her room, music loud enough to make the walls pulse. I'd stand outside her door sometimes, wanting to knock, to say something, anything. But what do you say when the person you love most believes your love hurt them? Then one afternoon, I came home to silence. Her door was open. On her bed lay the scrapbook, or what was left of it. She had taped some pages back together. Across the top of one page, in her handwriting, she'd written, "You never asked me how I remember these days." My chest ached. I sat down slowly, reading the page she'd repaired. It was from her 9th birthday, the day her dad forgot to call. I'd written, she cried quietly, pretending she didn't care. I wish I could take her sadness away. Underneath, in her new handwriting, she'd written, "I wasn't sad. I was angry. You never let me be angry." I closed the book and cried for the first time in years. The next morning, I made pancakes, her favourite, and waited. She came out cautiously, hair messy, eyes tired but softer. "I fixed some pages," she said, "not because I forgive you. Because I don't want my story told wrong." I nodded, tears stinging. "Then let's tell it together." For the next week, we sat at the table with glue sticks, scissors, and open wounds. She tore out some pages, rewrote others, added her own. When we got to her high school years, she pointed to one entry I'd written, "She barely talks to me anymore. I think she hates me." She crossed it out and wrote, "I didn't hate you. I just didn't know how to talk to someone who only listened for pain." That one hurt the most because it was true. I had turned her life into a tragedy I could manage, a story I could control. I'd loved her too much to see her as her own person. One evening, as we worked, she asked, "Why did you start it?" I hesitated. "Because I was scared I'd lose you." She frowned. "You did?" We sat in silence. The air between us felt fragile, like glass balancing on a table edge. Then she said, "You could start over. Make a new one, but this time about the good things." So we did. We started a new book, smaller, simpler. We called it The Light Book. The first page said, "When we finally told the truth." We filled it with the moments we'd ignored before. The day she got her acceptance letter to art school, the morning we danced in the kitchen, the night we made up after weeks of silence. For the first time in a long time, I stopped writing alone. Months later, as she prepared to move out for college, I found her packing the old scrapbook into a box. "You're taking it?" I asked. She nodded. "It's part of me now. The version you saw and the one I added." I wanted to tell her how proud I was, how much I loved her, but the words felt too small. So I just said, "Keep the light book too." She smiled. "Always." After she left, the apartment felt too quiet. I wandered from room to room, touching the edges of things she'd left behind. A scarf, a coffee mug, her perfume still faint in the hallway. The light book sat on the counter, open to the last page she'd written, "I forgive you, but don't forget me the way I was. Remember me the way I'm becoming." I closed it gently. A few weeks later, I got an envelope in the mail. Inside was a Polaroid of her smiling at her dorm window, sunlight hitting her face. On the back, she'd written, "For the scrapbook, the new one." I keep it on my nightstand now, not in a book, just there, unguarded. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night with the urge to write things down, to capture her life before it changes again. But I don't. I've learned that love isn't about recording every wound. It's about trusting that the person you love will heal without your proof. I see her on weekends sometimes. We cook, laugh, talk about everything but the scrapbook. It exists quietly between us, like a scar. Visible if you look closely, but no longer painful to touch. A few months ago, she called me late at night. "Mum," she said softly, "I showed the scrapbook to someone, my therapist. She said it's not just about pain, it's about love that didn't know where to go." I smiled through the tears. She's right. Before hanging up, she said, "I think you were trying to save me from forgetting, but I needed to forget some things." "I know," I whispered. "I needed to too." After we hung up, I walked to my closet and pulled out the last piece of that story, the page she'd rewritten. I taped it above my desk. It reads, "She doesn't need me to remember her pain. She needs me to witness her joy. Now, when I write about the good things. I write about her laughter when she tells me about her new friends, about the way she paints sunsets that look like forgiveness, about the sound of her voice when she says, 'I'm okay.' I write it not to keep her, but to let her go. Because love, I've learned, isn't a scrapbook of someone's scars. It's the space you give them to heal. And maybe that's all parenthood really is, learning to stop holding the pieces and instead watch the person you love become whole on their own. Crazy Reddit stories, wild twists, and real drama. Subscribe, comment your take, and stay for the next tale.